Hey, who's that flying overhead? It doesn't look like a bird. It doesn't look like a plane. I can see it's someone making Aliyah, flying to the Holy Land, Israel.
Did you pack these bags yourself? Or did you get someone to pack them for you? Are you carrying any toothpaste, falafel, or anything which can be brought in Israel? I traveled all around the world, so much to see and understand. But there's only one place that I know where I really love to stand. We're on our way, we're on our way, we're on our way to the promised land. We're on our way, we're on our way, we're on our way to
We're on our way to Israel. Yes, with the Aliyah Show. It is that time again. This show has got a lot of exciting guests, and we just can't wait to kick off. I am David Lev, and my co-host is Scott Shiloh. For this show, Scott and I are in different studios, so I'm just going to link up with him on our internet connection. Scott, hi, how are you doing?
Okay, doing pretty good. How's everybody else doing out there?
I'm pretty sure that everyone's doing well because I haven't heard anything otherwise, but you know me.
I hope we don't hear anything otherwise.
Well, you know, I don't complain. People don't listen when I do.
Okay.
But anyway, let's see what we've got on this week's show. This week's show is going to focus on the real and also the perceived challenges of communication between people moving to Israel and with those already long settled in the land. I'm sure you probably have your own experience of communication problems speaking American.
I was just thinking, I've spoken to you so many times. I don't know if everyone out there is aware that we are very good friends. And for some reason on this show, I think it's the first time I've ever really understood you.
Well, I think we're going to have to play that little segment.
You sound so clear. I mean, I understand your language. This, I think, is the first time. Right? You just say, yeah. And I really understand you now.
That's great. I think maybe we should actually play that segment which we recorded at that wedding.
Who are you with? Which side of the family are you with?
Well, I'm with the American side. I'm a guest for the American side of this family. And it's really a couple, one side from America, the other side from England.
And how do they communicate with each other? I mean,
they have an
American
interpreter. They must have an interpreter.
I think they must do as well.
We're going to stop for a short break, and then we'll be back with you very soon. Well, thanks for staying with us over the break. We are going to continue the show, and we're going to pick up where we left off on the whole question of communication. And let's hope that Scott and I don't need an interpreter between us. Although when I did mention the word migrant, wow, that was something special. He really didn't like the use of that word. Let's carry on.
Communication is very important, but you used the word migrant. I mean, when you think of migrants, I think of like farm workers, like in California, like working in a lettuce field. I mean, is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, we're talking about Aliyah to Mexico, aren't we? Okay, you win. So what words?
Languages are so different.
So what words should we use? Tomatoes, tomatoes. That's what Mexicans use.
I mean, I never thought of myself as a migrant that I've been here in Israel. I would just call olim, like that's the Hebrew word for immigrants.
Okay, I just figured that
if you want to work in a lettuce, and we do grow lettuce here, then you could be a migrant, I guess, if you want to work in a lettuce field.
Well, look, I guess so, but I was just thinking, I was trying to be very American friendly. I mean, I hear these ants sing really beloved members of families. I mean, every time I talk to someone, they tell me about how their aunt is doing, I mean, we have aunts in England. Okay, Scott, do you have any news for us?
Yeah, I think, there have been some interesting news items, and one of the news items I think that I find very, very interesting is, I think, has to do with Canada. And I just saw this announcement that the Prime Minister of Canada is going to be making his first trip to Israel. And that might excite some of the Canadians who are planning on making Aliyah. Do you know that there are a lot of Canadians here in Israel? Did you ever pay attention to that? A lot of Canadian Jews?
I heard about that, but I haven't really had the.
I never ever met a Canadian until I came here to Israel. And there are just so many, like places from Toronto has so many immigrants here. I think even proportionally more than any other city in North America. Does that make sense to you?
Well, it certainly does in terms of the fact that the Canadian Jews who I've met so far seem to be very proactive in terms of supporting Israel.
There just seem to be so many, and it's just fascinating to meet so many people from Canada. And now their Prime Minister is coming, and I find this very interesting. He just seems to be a counterweight to Obama because he's coming off as being very pro-Israel, very interested in and very supportive of Israel's foreign policy and the measures that Israel takes against terrorism. But the most fascinating thing about it is that I never heard of the Canadian Prime Minister. Now, let me ask you, before you look at any news report, do you know the name of the Prime Minister of Canada? I never heard of him before.
Well, hang on a second. Let me just take a guess.
Would
it be Stephen? Hang on a second. I'm just in my mind. I'm concentrating. Stephen Harper. Stephen Harper.
Harper. I never heard of this guy before. If somebody would have said, "Do you know who Stephen Harper is?" I never in a million years would have guessed that he's the Prime Minister of any country, let alone Canada. And he's coming now to express his support for Israel. So that should, it's something that we need right now, especially with all the tension going on with the United States, with the president over there, who I'm sure everybody knows who that is. But there is another country in North America that I think is even bigger land-wise than the U.S., and its prime minister will be visiting us very shortly.
Scott, do you think there's anything significant in terms of the timing that he's coming to? From what I understand, he made the announcement at an annual dinner of the.
That's obvious why he's coming here. Did you see the temperatures in Canada the past week? Anybody who would be there would want to come. Here. And we've had such great weather the past.
We have, except when we start praying for rain.
Obviously
that's the other side, but that's the other side of the coin. But we don't want to discourage tourists.
The weather, at least in terms of from a Canadian perspective, has been just beautiful. Every day has been sunny. Temperature in the mid to upper 70s. And I assume they use that in Canada if they're not on the centigrade scale. But anyway, I think it's a great time for this Prime Minister to come visit us and to take in the beautiful weather and to express his support for Israel and its policy.
From what I understand, also, I believe there's been some business forums as well, which has been encouraging more business between Canada and Israel. So I find that on the economical front as well as now on the political front, that it's great to be actually enjoying good relations with, as you mentioned, such a large and important country. Do you think there's anything significant once again in the timing for him coming over right now? What's been happening with Iran and Obama and the so-called realignment on their foreign policy?
Yes, I think that Harper seems to be a lot more skeptical about the changes going on in the Arab world. He was very, very skeptical of what the so-called Arab Spring that had developed, and he seems to be taking an independent stance away from some of the positions of the United States. And it could be that this is the appropriate time for him to come and to be supportive with all the regional tension going on, with the negotiations with Iran, and the tension. It's still friendly tension between Israel and the United States, but I think he can use this as an opportunity to stand behind us and to give us a boost as far as relationships with countries in North America.
We're going to stop for a short break, and then we'll be back with you very soon. Our next guest is Dr. Sam Minskoff, who has helped many Olim, potential Olim, with very important issues which they need to sort out when making Aliyah. We are going to discuss the subject of what sort of fears people would have before making Aliyah, whether these fears are grounded in any truth or reality or not. Dr. Sam, nice to have you on our show, on Aliyah Show.
Oh, nice to be here. Thank you.
As you heard from the segment for the wedding, the communications can not only affect people making Aliyah from having to switch to their mother tongue in English to a gibberish. Some they may have a very almost non-existent understanding of Hebrew. So, to what degree do you think that's an important consideration from a psychological point of view when making Aliyah?
Truth enough, it is. It's important. It's very important. You're going to be living in a land where Hebrew is the language. And so it would certainly help tremendously to speak it. Okay. If there is difficulty, and even great difficulty, then more of an opinionated side, it shouldn't deter you. Okay. Speaking from personal experience, it's the best subject I know at this point, is that for years, I've been here for 20 years, and I'm still struggling with the language, and I'm very happy here. Our daughter speaks it beautifully, and that's great because she's growing up here. It would not deter you, especially if, let's say if a person's living in a city like Jerusalem, where many people speak English, it's all right. Immigrants are welcome with open arms here. Aliyah. Just about every Israeli here, when they tell you you just made Aliyah, they respect you, they love you, they know what it took to make that decision, and it's interesting. You'll be able to communicate just because of that factor alone.
As a qualified counselor, Dr. Sam, can you give me some feedback from a more clinical viewpoint in terms of how it could affect someone and what would be the remedy?
Okay. Well, the first thing that comes to mind, excuse me, is the issue of culture shock. It is a different world, even though we've come in light years in the last 20 years since I've been here, and you just about have everything here on a material level as you can in the West, if that's an issue, for people. But it is a cultural shock. It is a shock at first. And, again, this is not to discourage people, but the reality is that it's a loss in terms of your separating from your loved ones that you've known and grown up with. You're going to miss the vagrant on the street corner there that you've seen all your life, since you were a kid, and it's all gone. And now you're in a new world. They try to help you along with these opening and all the benefits that immigrants get. They try to, get you on track and give you enough stimulation so that when you finally adapt and get used to the idea, you're fine. But in the beginning, it's a loss. It's like you go through a grieving period, you go through a mourning period, and sometimes you get discouraged and all that. And that's the part where you say, look, this is what we go through. Just because I don't feel good about the move after I made the move doesn't mean I move back. But they can expect, I guess, to put it in another term, homesickness, quote unquote, over the term home. But homesick, diaspora sickness, which is natural.
So to a degree, Dr. Sam, would you suggest that before you mentioned that some Olim could go to places like Jerusalem or other areas of the Anglophiles, areas where they're going to find people more speaking their mother language.
Sure,
their mother language, yeah. When you mentioned about culture shock, my own opinion, and this may be a little bit bloated arrogantly, but I see it as a two-way street. I see a lot of people come over, also maybe have an effect on the Israeli culture as well. For example, when I came, I found there was a great culture, there was a great cultural shock, but I decided that Israel would just have to get over it.
Excellent. Well, you see, that's it. You see, you're nailing it. This is hitting on the attitude. You see, a lot of times they do pre-counseling, with these, the Aliyah project, or it depends on what city you go to. We have this, a shliach helping to make arrangements. You do see a counselor. They want to check your motive. Why? Because they want to make sure that you're not one of these people that are all, it's a flash in the pan, all pie in the sky. They're going to come to the promised land, get disappointed in 2 months, and then go back. And then they've done all this, they've done all this time for, that could have been used otherwise, more wisely.
Sure.
But if you come over with that perspective that you're saying, okay, well, they're going to have to get over the culture shock. It's just that I'm just saying it's a different world. What is Israeli culture? I mean, that's at least a 2-week seminar in itself. I mean, we were dispersed, we came back, we're a marble conglomerate, God bless it, kind of a culture. The important thing is you're leaving a culture or a place that was once that's felt like home since birth to a different place, different phenomenon, a different state of affairs.
You actually raised something very pertinent. You suggested that one of the screening processes would be to actually to determine whether what someone's attitude is about coming over. And I was just wondering, as a screener, to someone who's actually screening someone, what right could they actually turn someone down on that basis? Because or would it help to?
No, quite the contrary. Quite the contrary. It's to encourage the Aliyah, okay? If there are issues coming up, they're presented to the individual, okay? So, and if the counselor has access or, privy to certain information bureaus or, agencies or whichever, because they have all kinds of groups and clubs and camps, here that the person might take use of during their adjustment period. So, for example, the counselor sizes up a person. They see that, I can see you're going to be you might be a little bit on the homesick side. Tell you what, they have a group for new Americans here, such as yourself. And it's like, you're kind of easing out of the warm bath, gradually. So situations like that, to make an assessment so that their adjustment here is as, shall we say, as stress-free as possible.
So, in just a few words, Dr. Sam, what would you say to someone who is a little bit reluctant to come over here because they believe, okay, I'm coming to a place where people don't speak my language, and I'm not sure how it's going to affect me. From a social point of view, what would you say to someone who is very reluctant, thinking, okay, I don't know if I can hack this. I really don't know if it's for me. I'm comfortable. I have all my friends, but from a communication point of view, I speak the language here, and I'm going to be diminishing my own ability to communicate. What would you say to someone like that?
Okay, I would say that seek out, I think in just about every major city or even a minor city, whatever that is in the United States, there is like a Jewish community centers. And they have all kinds of activities going on there, and especially they have activities going on concerning Israel, directly. And they have Ulpanim. I went to one of those. I mean, it's a way of breaking the ice. It's a way of taking the edge out of the fear while you're still in the old country, so to speak, so that when you arrive here, you can say, oh, okay, well, yeah, they say it would sound that way in the old pond, and then, because familiarization will take the edge off of the actual fear, you see, so that when they come in, they won't be so frightened or fearful that they might even be able to pick up the language that much quicker that way.
What would you say to someone who is someone who really has a learning disability, and maybe they can say shalom, they can say simple words in Hebrew, but heck, they think I'm not going to master this, and maybe they have good reason. Maybe they can't master it, and they're just only capable of speaking English. What would you say to them? Would you say, in that case, look, if you can't get to Ulpan, you're not going to be able to pick up a few words, then you're going to have problems? I mean, what would you say to someone in that situation?
You mean, if I understand the question clearly, that somebody in that situation is apparently hopeless?
Yeah,
when it comes to navigating themselves socially or professionally?
It does happen. It does happen.
Okay, no, I understand it does happen. In fact, I know several people who just, they've been here for like decades, 30 years. And, they know the language, they can get around in the shuk perhaps, like tourist, level, but they don't get it. And they're here, they're happy. My answer would be a straight flat no. It would not be hopeless. Because Israel now has advanced to a point where there's something here for everybody. regardless. And they're very conscious of such learning disabilities here. Things have improved the last 20 years, I can't tell you, because I did that, because I was working with that in the field in the States decades before that. So they've made some, great advancements here, and they make it so that learning is geared to people with such, disabilities.
Well,
Even if they don't go into these little things, they'll pick up. They will pick up whatever it is that they need to pick up in order to get around.
excellent. So,
Yeah, and again, unless you live in a real Hebrew-speaking, we got to be realistic here. Village on some part of the country that's it. Rocky Reet, and that's only Hebrew. Okay, then obviously you're not going to go there.
so Sam, where you live, are there English speakers around, or do you only have...
All over the place. In fact, when I try to speak Hebrew, when I attempt to speak Hebrew to Israel, they break out in English. I said to my wife, "How did you know I'm American? What is it?" I'm joking. I'm joking.
I know, you joke, but I've heard of people who actually does happen to. Look,
how do you know American? Oh, I guess my fingernails gave it away. I don't know, something.
There you've heard it from...
Can't be the way I speak. Right.
Thank you very much. There you've heard it
Sure,
from
my pleasure.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sam. There you heard it from Dr. Sam Minskoff himself, and we hope to have Dr. Sam back on a regular basis.
When we move here to Israel, we really have to take into account that our use of words, and not even getting into the Hebrew of learning of the necessity of learning Hebrew, but just keeping with the English-speaking world, there are differences, but I think it can be very interesting, very enriching to become acquainted with English speakers from different parts of the world and the nuances that each one has in his own different form of English.
For sure, but one of the key issues which many people have is not so much integrating with English-speaking people, but in actual fact, the whole concept in their mind that they're coming somewhere which is not English-speaking. They see Israel as people going saying, "Yalla, yalla, mata mimeni." Translation is very hard to but they see like people going crazy. Who are these people? Am I supposed to live amongst these crazy people? Well, you're bringing up something interesting, that people are coming from places where they speak crazily to each other, but in the language which they do understand. And here they're looking at coming to a place where they speak crazy, but in language which they don't understand. Maybe there's a blessing there, because in actual fact, a lot of Jewish people and Israelis, when they're talking to each other, they get very passionate, they get very emotionally driven. But in actual fact, there's something very warm also about the way they like to express themselves. For example, someone on a taxi was saying, I couldn't understand why the person was just complaining all the time and saying these crazy things. But then afterwards, the taxi driver explained, look, it's like this, we're like one big family. So, we talk to each other. Sometimes we raise our voice a little bit, we get excited. But at the end of the day, we're all part of the same family. So we feel quite relaxed about letting off a bit of steam about being ourselves. And I think there's something really, really to be said about that. But one of the main ingredients of the show is really about people's concerns about moving somewhere, not where speaking with other English-speaking people or an American or anything like that is concerned, but what they perceive as to be going into a country where they don't speak English. Hey, what's going on here? Where it's only Hebrew. So as far as
it's not only, I mean, there's so much English in Israel. I mean, most of you, the road signs or much information you can easily acquire in English. I think English is almost a semi-official language in Israel. That doesn't mean to say that if you don't know any Hebrew, it's going to be totally easy in every situation and circumstance. But I think much of the country is geared towards expressing itself in English as much as not as much as in Hebrew, but certainly more than any other foreign language. I think that English-speaking immigrants should have an easier time adapting than immigrants from most other countries, because English is really almost anywhere you go.
Okay, next subject. Okay, so Stephen Harper is not making Aliyah, but I hope you listening to this program, particularly if you're from Canada, and you must be very interested about what we're talking. When I say about, what does about mean? Does that mean about or about? I'm sort of.
What are you talking about?
I'm talking about. What are you talking about? About. I'm trying to understand Canadian. Do they say? I was talking about Canadians making Aliyah.
You mean wait? Canadians have a different language? I mean, I don't know.
So I understood. Yeah.
They do have some of them. Some of them do sound a little bit different. You're right. I guess it's the cold up there. Maybe they shiver a lot in the winter, and that affects their language. I really don't know. I don't have any explanation. And as I said, there are many Canadians, which seems to in Israel, which seems to indicate that the Canadian Jewish community is very Zionistic, more Zionistic perhaps than the American community, and identifies with Israel to a much larger extent, or that their national Canadian identity isn't as powerful as it is in the States, and that gives them more of a feeling or an ability to identify with the state of Israel. Maybe some of our listeners could come in and give us some reasons or examples of why this trend of Canadian Aliyah has been so dramatic and much more than American Aliyah. I'd certainly would like to find out why.
So how about that? If there are any Canadian listeners out there, we'd love to hear what your views are on it. I'm just thinking what you mentioned there, Scott, about the national identity there. It may have something to do perhaps with the leadership, because if you have a leader like Stephen Harper, who's I'm looking at a photograph of him. They're both smiling at each other with him and Benjamin Netanyahu, our Prime Minister. And if there's initiative from the top, then obviously that seems it's something which it could filter down.
Don't really know much about Canada.
Okay.
It's got north, and it's cold there, especially this time of year, and they've got a lot of trees and a lot of forests.
Yeah, and they haven't got the weather we've got at the moment. Hey, there's a lot of good reasons to come over here. And you even get to meet good Jews and crazy Jews and normal Jews, and heck, you can't get away from Jews. I'm sorry about that. Hey, look, we've got to go for a wrap now. We look forward to having you back with us next week, when the subject will be about finding houses in Israel, and there's going to be a lot of interesting guests on that particular show. Over to you, Scott. I say good night to everyone, and Scott.
Okay, it's been very nice. It's been very interesting, and I learned something new.
Which is
that the Prime Minister of Canada is called Stephen Harper.
Shake all the dust off from the diaspora and get yourself ready and come to the promised land. We're on our way, yeah, we're on our way with the Aliyah Show.